Hello, everyone. Hello, Mashria. How's it going? Thank you for being here and chatting.
Hello, Nick. Thank you for hosting this meeting as well.
My pleasure. We have great conversations every week. I'm excited for this week. I do accessibility for work, and you are really heavily involved in the blockchain. And I think there's a lot of overlap between these two. What do you think? I'm excited to talk about that.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of overlap because the blockchain itself is one area that is probably highly inaccessible for now. And now with you in accessibility, I think it's a job to figure out how we make the blockchain accessible, or if we explain to the people how the blockchain can be accessible.
I was reading something about it, maybe a good place to start, how like an end user, someone who would be out there using it, won't really know if an application they're using is built on the blockchain or if it's built on Web 2.0. So Web 2.0 being conventional internet that we have today, and then 3.0 being the blockchain internet. But the end user wouldn't really know if their application were on either of these, right? It's kind of like the same interface.
You are right. You're right, Nick. Web 2.0 or Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and Web 3.0 is a classification that was given to us by Gavin Wood very recently. Gavin Wood said that Web 1.0 was for creating text. The very first internets of the 1990s, where the company that was creating text would just share the text with people through the hypertext protocol, and then people would look at it in still web pages.
Yeah, there was no interaction, no functionality. Then we moved to 2.0 where we it's like what we have now, where we can interact, like we create content. We're not just users, right?
Yes. Now that came at the invention of second generation web, which now Gavin would call Web 2.0, which had built on JavaScript and HTML5, and that meant that you could create dynamic website. That a website now, instead of taking information just from the company to the people could contribute information. And then what did we see? The rise of Facebook, where the content itself is generated by the user-generated content. And then even much more than just setting text. Web 2.0 enabled the collection of information from users. So if you go to the website, then the companies could tell what you're doing in the website, and they could actually use that information to target advertisements. That's Web 2.0.
So it's just a way where people are creating content. They're essentially the product, but it's enabled everything we have today. It enables Google, Twitter, Facebook. This is all Web 2.0. That's how it works. But in Web 3.0, we're no longer going to have these centralized companies managing it. Instead, we're going to have it all decentralized on the blockchain, but we could still have similar products and services that we have today, but without a monopoly on them. They could be really decentralized. But is it still going to be, I don't know this, is it JavaScript and HTML5 that is still used to code a user interface in Web 3.0?
Pretty much a lot of it is going to be similar scripting language, but we have new languages invented for the blockchain, like Solidity, which is used to build the Ethereum network. I see Gavin Wood himself is the one who wrote Ethereum network together with Vitalik Buterin using Solidity. So the language, even Solidity, is just a metamorphosis, just a slight change of JavaScript, and so the language is getting more advanced. So the only difference between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0 is that Web 2.0 was centralized to these organizations, big organizations like Facebook, Google, Amazon, and the like. But Web 3.0 is decentralized, and it is on the blockchain.
So, but if at the end of the day, if I'm interacting with something on the blockchain, I'm on a website, I'm on a mobile application, and this mobile application website is built with JavaScript, HTML5, CSS, like traditional code that, say, an assistive technology would interact with.
Yeah, absolutely. So it has no difference from the user's point of perspective. It has no difference. I think the difference is who has the control. Is that the user has more control of what someone does to the data, because decentralization means that one company is not keeping all the data for you. There's not one point of control, but the control is decentralized. The blockchain enables that. So the classification, really, to say Web 3.0, it's really not that strict as far as the code is concerned. It is the idea that now information, and who gathers information, who keeps the information, who owns the information, is decentralized.
Now, I work in accessibility. I can't see very well. I use a screen reader. It's assistive technology, but I can't use, it's very difficult, very challenging, or impossible to use decentralized applications built on Web3. despite that it's the same interface that this technology I'm using is interacting through, right? So why is that? I can't use it. Other people can't use it. They say it's a decentralized web that brings, equality globally. It, decentralizes power, brings opportunity. But if you use an assistive technology, you can't be part of that conversation right now.
Yeah, for now, because the accessibility of the software is very high up in the software stack, the stack of the internet, because it's about the user interface, user experience, user interface, UX, user experience, user interface. That user interface really has nothing to do with the underlying technology. What it has to do is with the developers themselves, whether they're tagging their things the right way when they're creating the application. For example, you know that for us to use the job access with speech software, JAWS, screen reader.
Yeah.
Screen reader identifies a specific web elements. It accesses headings. Headings are also there in Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office documents. It identifies buttons.
Yep.
It identifies links. Those things are universal in all web applications, whether there's Web 2.0 or Web 3.0. But it turns out that because the people writing the blockchain products are at a very, very high speed, it's huge frenzy. I think they have not stopped to think about, are we making our applications accessible? And I think that's the next challenge. So if you create a blockchain wallet, you want to make sure that wallet is accessible. It can be read using the screen reader software. But it's much different from Web 2.0.
Now that's presently, let's say in a certain jurisdiction, say in the United States, there are laws that require accessibility. But
yes,
with these applications being developed around the globe, there's no jurisdiction to enforce that accessibility be included from the very start of a project. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, there's no jurisdiction. I think this conversation is very important to find out how do you bring awareness to the developers. Because say a developer is somewhere in Africa or somewhere in Asia or somewhere in Russia, they're not subject to the same jurisdiction. They're not worried about what the law says, but it is the usability of their software or the application to the target audience. If the target audience cannot use it, it's not going to be helpful. So I think instead of now for the government regulating these things, it is the market competition. Because if somebody makes a software, an application that is not accessible to the people, it means it's not going to be competitive in the market. And soon enough, it's just going to be swallowed out and disappear into the nether. And so that's what I see. That the government may not enforce all this everywhere in the world. And I think that the web, we have an organization by Gavin Wood called Web 3.0 Foundation. I think also that's a good organization to talk to about these matters. I think Gavin Wood is in Europe. We can try to reach him and tell him, could you actually lead a movement where people with low vision and blindness, people who need screen reading software, can access these Web 3.0 applications? It is possible. You see, when the internet came the very beginning, they formed the W3 consortium, which is the
W3C.
W3C consortium, yeah, the W3C. And you see, that helped to create the standards for the web itself. Now we're having the Web3 Foundation, which is helping to create standard for the Web 3.0. And I think those are the people who would have an effect on this before the government can catch up.
It is a trend that accessibility matters, and it's being implemented in companies, and like the culture around it is being created in different companies. The current model of company where we have like the Amazons, Facebooks, and I feel like it's mostly probably being pushed down from the top. Maybe like people don't want to get sued, therefore they're making their staff do certain things to ensure that they're accessible. But how do you think one of these organizations like the W3C or the Web, the other one that you just said there, do you think they can enforce it in a similar way? It's essentially guidance, and then countries or governments say you must follow this particular guidance. Do you see guidance by them being adopted by countries?
Yes, I believe that those organizations have got a lot more to say, even before the government can say anything, because government people do not know what to say until those organizations, like what W3C did was to create the standard, for the internet, and of course the internet protocol itself. And then what the government has to do is just to take that and enforce it in its own country. And before even the government can enforce it, market competition is very, very severe. It's a very severe mode of governance. That if you don't like your product, then you don't need to wait for the government to knock you out. You'll be knocked out by your own, by yourself. See, and so what I saw in the evolution of the internet in the last decade or so is that organizations that or people who are not keeping up with the standards just get washed out and thrown out in the trash. It's just that simple. Market competition. Government gets into the play maybe 10 or 20 years later. This is when we are hearing about government talking about accessibility after companies have been trying to implement it for years. It's that the accessibility has not become a web standard, because people with low vision and people who don't have accessibility, they did not have that, they are not that vocal in the market. So companies did not start creating accessibility because of the government. They started doing it because of the consumers. Because the consumers demand it, and if they don't demand, if they don't get it, they abandon that, and then they abandon the product. So the product gets out of market.
So in a situation, well, in a market situation like this, let's take, I'll say Coinbase, for example, because that's the one I've tried to use. Coinbase is like I'm thinking of it like a browser, like Google Chrome or something. And then on Coinbase, you'd have your different DApps, your decentralized apps. And each of those apps are developed by separate companies. These are just blockchain companies, essentially. So they each DApp is responsible for ensuring its own accessibility and will likely succeed or fail in part due to their accessibility efforts, you think?
Yes. You see, when it's in competition, the best people win. They are not good. They are actually rejected by the market. And that is the word of the capitalism. That when there's fair market competition, the best will always win. And those who are giving people what they want, they tend to win. And so it's up to understanding what the market wants, and so that they can win. Now I see that Coinbase itself. You see, Coinbase, you could say it's 2.0, Web 2.0, and Web 3.0 together, because all the applications that are on blockchain are on Coinbase. All the applications, like the coins that Coinbase is displaying on its network, they are on the blockchain. And you see, Coinbase is a term that comes from the blockchain itself. The base that produces the coins, called the Coinbase. So that's a blockchain term. It's a Web 3.0 term. But now the user interface and the user experience should be accessible, regardless of whether it is. I don't know your experience with the Coinbase. Are you able to access the Coinbase well with the screen reader?
I don't know what you would say, but it's tough to say if I know if I can do it well, right? Because if large portions of it are just completely blocked from access, it's tough to get a full sense of its capabilities. But I can tell you I can transfer funds into and out of Coinbase. I can convert crypto into different currencies. I can transfer money from Coinbase to a Coinbase wallet. I can browse through different DApps that are available. And if I go to try to use one or convert a currency, that's where I've hit a wall. There may be a way to work around it, but I didn't figure it out in 20 minutes. And I doubt a lot of other people are going to figure it out either. So that's just a very poor experience at that point.
Yeah. So there's Coinbase. And then there are other decentralized applications. Coinbase is a centralized application. It doesn't mean that it doesn't display blockchain decentralized systems, but it's based on the ethos of the previous exchange systems, which was centralized, which we talked about briefly in the last episode. Now we have decentralized application today, like Uniswap and unbound finance. Those are the ones that I feel that very, very much that they need to, when they're developers, need to be very, very conscious of creating accessibilities in functions in their applications, because the Coinbase is mainly, you could say, very, very popular in the United States and maybe in Europe. But when you come to countries outside, like say in Africa and America and far beyond even Asia, people are much more on the decentralized exchanges like Uniswap. And the reason is they don't have such huge entrance fee or entrance requirements, and they enable people who create cryptocurrencies to list their coins, and they become very, very easily accessible to local people. But accessibility to screen readers, I'm not sure that they are very, very good. So that is where a lot of work needs to be, because they are growing so fast in popularity in developing nations around the world, and where you could have a lot of people without good eyesight, and they need accessibility features like voice and talkback. Yeah. And then we have MetaMask. MetaMask has been around for quite a bit of time. I think it's about 2015. It was mainly built for exchanging Ethereum tokens or Ethereum coins. It was built on the Ethereum network, and then it became much more broadened, that now enables exchange of very many other coins, including coins from other blockchains. And so MetaMask is very, very popular in the world. And that one also, I feel like it should be very, very accessible. Yeah, because MetaMask became the first wallet to connect to Uniswap, which is a completely decentralized exchange. So there is a very huge horizon for innovation up ahead.
I feel better about it than I did going into the conversation.
Yeah, so I think what we need to do is find out the players that found the foundations. Like I'm talking about Gavin Wood, the Web3 Foundation. You can get in touch with him and people in their network, in the Web3 system, the movers and shakers, and you tell them the importance of creating a standards that everyone who is creating decentralized applications like those DApps, everyone creating those decentralized applications also be required through the Web3 Foundation, be required to make those applications accessible.
Absolutely.
I think it's very easy to do that today, because the creation of decentralized application is a very shared experience. What people do is that the guys who invent something like Uniswap, they create a GitHub, system where they start repositories. They reposit all the code in GitHub, and that code becomes accessible to other developers. So it's very, very well shared. Some of the problem with that is other developers anywhere in the world, they can take the code and create their own Uniswap, what's called cloning.
Yeah.
And that is not so bad. I think even if you clone something from somebody else, but you're not creative enough to make it competitive, you still are not going to be competitive.
Yeah.
So taking something that's already built, thinking that it's going to make you the richest is not the solution. And that's how this open source movement has gained a lot of traction, because people believe that if people are creative, they are going to take that code and do something useful for other people.
Can I ask you something? I'm not sure if you know this, but can I ask you something about code? So in GitHub, I assume you'd have the code there for your interface, your HTML5, your Java script, and that's your interface is there. But is your blockchain code language, is that also in GitHub? And are they melded? Like if we have, I forget what the term is called, but like a string of code for an application and a string of code for the blockchain, are they just completely separate and then linked in one key way, or are they interwoven?
They're interwoven. So I think to make this easier to understand is this. The language, code is a language for describing something. And so if today the language for writing many of these decentralized applications is Solidity. Bitcoin was written in the C language, I think C++. But Ethereum is built on Solidity language, which is an invention, an advancement of C++ by Gavin Wood and Ethereum and Vitalik Buterin.
Yeah.
Now that code, you could say if you see it the first time and you don't know what it is, you might think it's JavaScript. It's not just the same. It's just description, instructions that give computers instruction on what to do. So it is, and I believe that if for example someone knows how to write one type of code, it can very easily learn how to write the other, because it is not very complicated. That's why I see people who know how to write JavaScript and also know how to write C++, they're also able to learn very quickly how to write the functions for Solidity. Because I tell you, when you started working on blockchain in Nairobi, all the people that work in the office had never ever seen Solidity in life, never seen it. And I told them, now listen, we are being excluded from the market because we don't create technology of our own. Let's create technology for payment gateway. And when they asked me, what are we going to do? We are going to write the technology for payment gateway in Solidity. So I sent them to go and study it and look at it. It didn't take long for them to understand it, because they are already conversant with the technology for web development. They know it's the same technology for web development. It's the same language. It's just small minor changes. And when they do that, they are able now to create the decentralized application just by looking at how functions are expressed in the Solidity and how different it is. And of course, GitHub and people in the open source movement share their scripts, so you can actually look and see what functions you're missing or what function you need to include. And that's why open source is very, very powerful through the GitHub. So GitHub allows people to reposit their code, and they say that's like the code for the Ubri coin when you build it is deposited in GitHub. You can also protect that through GitHub, protect the code through passwords to prevent other people from seeing it, or you can just give it out for free so that people can copy it if they want. So people who are in software development, they're familiar with this and they know. But because GitHub has enabled empowered hundreds of thousands of developers in the world, young people who want to do something with their life without having to worry about where they will learn this through GitHub.
That's pretty cool. Have you spent much time on Git? Do you know if GitHub is? I have it, and I've downloaded a repository from it, and I've navigated a little bit. And it seemed all right, but I did almost nothing in there. Have you worked with it at all?
Yes, I did when I was fully isolated. But now I also got into many managerial functions up in the organization. So I delegated that work to our young developers. Yeah, but you're still working. Even right now, we have projects going on which are on GitHub, building a delivery system, as I told you, for the market for global health, for delivery of goods in the villages. And that also has GitHub repositories, and where the team shares information and they post the code there and they update each other. That's where the work is happening. So it is not like so different from the traditional coding for the web application development. It is just that Gavin Wood has called it Web 3.0 because it is decentralized. And I think you could say decentralized, talking about it as Web 3.0 is not really a technology code-based idea, is a political idea. You could say it's above administrative idea. Web 3.0 is administrative because at the administrative level, then you want to make sure that people are maintaining the standards that are accessible to everyone from the administrative perspective. But from the technology perspective, the technology is the same old technology.
Well, cool. That feels like a very possible thing to work toward. It's a very clear idea for a goal.
This is why someone like Jack Dorsey in Twitter, said that Web 2.0 is just a word, because from a technical standpoint, he doesn't see what it is. And that's what Jack Dorsey said. Oh, I don't believe in Web 3.0. But you can see from administrative perspective, it is not just a word, because it means who is going to be regulating it, because there's no government here. we're talking about multiplicity.
Now, do you know the like if we look at the global population right now, what percent of the global population is using Web 2.0 products? And then what percent of the population is presently using decentralized applications? And do you know anything about the growth rate for adoption of decentralized applications in the general public globally?
I don't have those numbers of head right away, but I know that Web 2.0, I can just look at Kenya, the country, where I have been working, is that Web 2.0 high adoption. How do I know? People use Web 2.0 technologies on their phones to transact business. We have e-cash. The money is all electronic, known as M-Pesa. M-Pesa is a Web 2.0 type of idea. And then almost every family has got a smartphone where people use Facebook and they use WhatsApp for communication. Facebook to communicate with our friends, and WhatsApp for talking to one another and exchanging documents and videos. So that you would say the penetrance for that is 100% in the nation. I would say.
Yeah. I
don't know any family in the country that does not have access. You could say that you cannot have 100% engagement, but even the nomadic people, like people say the Maasais and the Turkanas, who they spend the whole day walking behind their cattle. They have cell phones and smartphones. They communicate by WhatsApp. Can you believe
it? Now, if we look back, what was so? I know it was. We've gone through rapid transformation in the United States, or even globally, everywhere. But technologically, can you recap the timeline? I believe this is probably in your general knowledge bank. When did the internet really start? And just kind of, can you paint a word picture for just that level of explosion for what the internet did and how quickly it spread?
The internet spread like wildfire. This is what happens now. It was very slow in the beginning, because I remember when I was in medical school in Nairobi in the early 90s, late 80s, we had the modem, the 28K modem, which we could try to access email. There was only email was the internet that time. That is the early 1990s. And then just about 2 years later, like 1994 or 93, we got HTML, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, where the people making web pages and sending web pages to everybody in the world. You see? That, and then, WWW, World Wide Web idea came in the you could say mid-1990s, 1994, 95. And that's why we have this Web 1.0, where we'll just be exchanging Hypertext Protocol. So the adoption was not very, very high until you could say late 90s, when now Web 2.0 came and people had these dynamic websites where you can enter your information on the web, and the web begins collecting data that comes from people, individuals. But the real explosion, I would say, came around mid-2000s, where 2005, we got companies like Facebook coming up. And because now that is completely dynamic, object-oriented software, which now you can actually enter data. It collects data on the fly and manage to learn your likes and things like that. There was rapid explosion, even in the African continent, where people don't usually, they are not adopted the internet. It came in. And then the third thing that came in was the voice over the internet protocol, which now enabled things like WhatsApp, application like WhatsApp, to come to life. And that means that you bypass the entire telecommunication network. You can talk to anyone in the world, wherever you are, so long as that person has got an internet connection. That, I would say that, particularly in African countries, where telecommunication was very, very expensive, that is really what revolutionized the internet. You could say WhatsApp. Because by you could say by the late 2000s, like around in the beginning of 2010, people on WhatsApp over there, because WhatsApp came around in 2008. 2 years later, it has spread throughout the developing countries. Yeah, but adoption of WhatsApp in the United States has been slow. But this is because people in the US already have enough telecommunication force network. But where people don't have access to telecommunication, WhatsApp became very successful and exploded like on everybody on the phone, everyone with a phone. And I just told you that you would find nomadic people going after animals and wildlife and looking at their domestic animals in the desert walking about. They have cell phones that have got WhatsApp on them.
So you're saying that the explosion really started to hit at 2005. So we're 17 years from 2005. So it's like the world we live in today is not the world that existed 20 years ago. It's dramatically different. And if the decentralized web follows a similar trajectory, then we could be looking at an entirely different world in 2 decades.
Totally. You know, 2 decades, you see, decentralization came around to 2009 after the event of Bitcoin by Satoshi Nakamoto. And then later on started rising very quickly with the advent of Ethereum, 2015. You could say now we have many years? 7 years later? No, 2015 to today. And then by 2025, which is now maybe 3 years down the road, you're going to see a major inflection point. And by 2030, I think we'll be in a completely different world, which is now on Web 3.0 and decentralized applications. Yeah. Yes. And this internet itself has not grown without resistance. There's so much resistance from the incumbent organizations, you know, that are losing business because internet has come. And then internet came in the 1990s. But then there's also going to be a lot of business lost or businesses brought down by the advent of the Web 3.0 and the decentralized, the blockchain itself, that there's a lot of resistance to go to that level. But now, many of those companies that you could say are now here, the incumbent ones which are on Web 2.0, are very powerful. And I believe that they may want to be, maybe they're beginning to change, going to the decentralized or Web 3.0. Even if some of them are saying, it's like what Twitter, the gentleman was saying, Web 3.0 is just a fad. It's not really a fad. It's something real. It's happening. Yeah, but still, that's somebody who is on Web 2.0 already.
It can't be a fad. It literally is just the evolution of code, right? It's strictly logical.
Yeah. So this is what I would say. People get ready for it. It's gonna be there. Saying something is a fad, which something is actually happening, will not make it a fad. It will not make anything go away. Yeah. So that is change whose time has come.
No, but that makes it all more pressing because things don't happen slowly. It's not like, let's say in 20 years everything is very different, but let's say that the accessibility of Web 3 doesn't really come along for another 5 years. That's 25% on the way to the journey. That's a 25% jump start for people who don't need any assistive technology to acclimate to the new digital kind of environment, the new way of kind of earning income and, you know, transacting. It's a 25% advantage to people who don't experience a lived disadvantage. What do you think about that?
Yes, 25%. It's a very huge. Yeah, that's a big. 25% is significant horizon. Yeah, I think it is, and it's there. We And I think the percentage, particularly people who don't have accessibility because they need to use accessibility software to access the Web 3.0, they won't have to wait too long because, as I say, there has been a huge movement to enforce accessibility for the Web 2.0, and this there were people. It's only that the software that's coming for Web 3.0 is coming for countries outside the United States, so there may not be direct government enforcement, but that is not as powerful as the competition enforcement by the competition itself. Because the standards are created, and the people who are there in that standard creation can now tell people, listen, don't make software that's not accessible, and then people hear it, and then you present software that's not accessible, it's not going to be accepted by the market. So the market is going to have to be much more powerful. And I believe the market's very, very, very powerful in enforcing some of the standards, forcing people to enforce their standards because they get market rejection.
Yeah. I think it's, we're deep into living with Web 2, and there's barriers for people of various abilities, disabilities, right? And you would think that wouldn't be the case. I would think at this point in the game. So yeah. I think you, sir, are an optimist.
Let me tell you what my philosophy is. My philosophy is the aboveness of life. I don't look at the dark side because the darkness does not exist. That's what I know, is that whenever you see something dark, it means it's always missing its light. So you will turn off the light, then the light comes into that. And I believe that there's a lot of people who would like to put darkness into these matters. But market eventually is very sensitive to issues like this. And the way I'm optimistic is because market is always right. Because market is not one individual; it's a lot of people together. And if a lot of people together look at something, that something becomes enforced. So the market enforcement becomes possible, because that is not even politics; it's just the demand for excellence. So excellence in this is going to be excellence in making their software accessible. That's why I always look on the bright side of life. And those people who try to reject the brightness of life, they reject themselves out of the brightness. That's my positive outlook. What I call the aboveness of life.
The whatness of life?
Aboveness.
Aboveness of life.
Yeah. You have to look at the aboveness of life. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to think I'm an optimist like you, but I also like to play devil's advocate. And it's when you hop back and forth between devil's advocate and optimist, eventually you forget who you are.
Yeah, it's a devil. You see, the devil does not need an advocate. The devil just needs to be left alone to do his own things. If you become devil advocate, there'll be too much work to do. But he doesn't require advocate.
Good. Well, I think maybe a good place to wrap it up here. What do you think?
I think it's good. Yeah, I think this is a great conversation, and of course opens up new frontiers. What should we be talking about now in the future? The future of Web 3.0 in terms of accessibility, and who we can contact now. The Web 3.0, the developers, the foundation itself, and there are people we can speak to, tell them about making sure that we add the standards of an accessibility standard to every decentralized application. And that is possible because the code that is shared on the GitHub should come with accessibility features in itself, so that people in places where they need that code because they themselves do not have too many resources to develop the code, they can take the code that has got accessibility features built within it. Yeah. And for large players like Coinbase, like Uniswap, we can also talk to them and MetaMask in Ethereum and even Binance. Talk to them and tell them, hey, your work is very important, that your products are also very, very accessible. And also we require that people who list their products over there to make sure they are accessible as well.
Yeah. Well, that sounds perfect.
Yeah.
But I definitely look forward to continuing this with you. So I think we'll this is to you and to everyone who's watching. We'll have another conversation next week, and hopefully we can build on this. We might pivot to a different topic, but we may stay on this, and I want to keep working on this with you.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much,
Great.
Nick. And have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too, Mashria.